make lots of money, be super beige, and cheat on your wife. 80s man. Hello, welcome to Cover Your Eyes. Today we're talking about the movie Desperately Seeking Susan from 1985. Hello, Sarah.
Hey, Holly. So this movie, I was really excited to watch it because I loved it so much as a child, and I really haven't seen it in a long time. I mean, I don't think I really watched it as an adult again,
Oh,
but
really?
yeah, I don't think I did. Maybe I'd see like bits of it here and there on like TBS or you know what I mean? I don't know, but I don't think I ever like sat down and fully watched it again. And so I was excited to see it again, and it definitely held up. I really loved it this time too. And the scenery, just like the visuals, every scene was just so amazing and like striking. And
Mhm.
I just wanted to like eat it up. I don't know. I just felt like a visceral reaction to every scene. It was so good. The clothes, the city scenery, just everything.
Did you
I
want to
loved
eat
it.
it up like the giant sundae poster on the wall in Roberta's kitchen?
Yes. And the giant bag of cheese puffs that Madonna always had with her. I love that. Seeing like the scene with that jacket with the pyramid on the back, I was like, oh yes. I just want that jacket. I was like, I need more mesh in my life. Like after
You,
watching it again, I'm like, we need to bring mesh back. It's,
yeah.
it's so good. I just loved it.
You can get that jacket on Etsy.
I was wondering, okay, that makes sense.
$200. I just looked it
Oh,
up.
awesome. What about the earrings?
Oh, I don't know about that. So those earrings, I always felt like they were gonna rip somebody's ear out.
Yeah.
I mean, like I would be like, I was like nervous the whole time I would see when I would see one of them with the earring, I'm like, oh God, their poor earlobe.
They do look really heavy.
So I loved this movie as well as a child. It was probably, I think I probably saw it when I was like, I mean, 85. So I was probably like 8 when I saw it. And I really loved Madonna and I really loved her Like a Virgin video in particular.
Hmm.
I wanted to roll around like that with a tiger.
I know.
I mean, come on. And which definitely alarmed my mom.
Like I have a crush on a tiger or lion now.
Because I used to I used to do the like a virgin roll around dance. And just, I saw my mom, I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, don't do that.
Can't
I
help
didn't
it.
know. Whatever.
Yeah, you didn't know. I was looking it up because obviously I loved Madonna too. And I just always wanted to know, like, okay, I like to put movies into a context of like where was she in her career? Like when she did this movie, like what was going
Mhm.
on. So um I kind of looked up like when was Like a Virgin? Because that was like her main
Yeah.
first big hit, right? But then so her
Well,
song Holiday was her first hit in
mhm,
1983. And then Like
mhm.
a Virgin was 1984, and then she was in this movie in 1985. So I'm like, okay, she was already like a big star, but not like the huge superstar
Mhm.
that she would become. So
I think she was a star with people that watched MTV
yeah.
because all her videos, I mean, I remember I never forgot the day I was sitting watching MTV and I saw the Borderline video
Mm.
and I was like completely mesmerized. I'd never seen anybody dress like that before. And I just like, I wanted that.
Yes.
I was just like, this is how I would like to proceed. When I get
Yeah.
older, because she seemed really like self assured.
Hmm.
And I was not getting a lot of examples of that, of self-assuredness in my home life. I didn't really know any women who were self-assured, and in fact, I felt like the women around would kind of sneer at other women who were self-assured.
Hmm.
Did you notice that
Yeah.
growing
And I
up?
think Madonna just like really owned it. And she was comfortable with her sexuality, but she wasn't like relying on it, you know? It's like she
Mhm.
was dressing that way because she wanted to, and that was her style, not just because she wanted to like look sexy or attract people. And it was just like she had the confidence to wear that kind of stuff, and it came through. And then it made us want to wear it. And then I went and bought lace gloves immediately and wore them with my Easter dress.
Nice.
I saw that the woman who directed it, her name was Suzanne, or I think Susan. I think her
Mhm.
name was Susan. I can't remember her last name now, but apparently it was like her directorial debut. And she directed a movie called Smithereens. It was about like New York in the 80s. And it was the first film to be accepted at Cannes from like a United States director.
Really?
So, yeah, that's what I read in like this little blurb. I was like, whoa, that makes sense why this movie was just like so visually stunning, because it was a really cool director and it was directed by a woman and produced by a woman. So I thought that was pretty neat. Um, I was just thinking, because, a lot of times in movies that have a pop star in them are really just supposed to be like a vehicle to launch the star farther, and the movie's not really that good.
Mhm.
Nothing against Britney Spears, but I'm thinking of like Crossroads or things like that, where it's like this movie has a pop star in it, and that's all that should really count. And this wasn't like that. Like this movie was actually really good and really well directed. So it wasn't only about having Madonna in it. It was just like a good movie that Madonna was in. So the movie was directed by a woman named Susan Settleman. It was her directorial debut.
Yes, I liked that too, and I think part of it is because Madonna, her real dream was to be an actress, like to be a well-renowned, seriously regarded actress.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so her being in this movie, like you notice that there's only one song of hers in the movie, Get Him, what is it, Into the
Get
Groove.
into the groove.
And that wasn't even on the soundtrack
Oh.
because of, the recording rights or whatever. It makes sense to me that the whole pop star angle wasn't really promoted. It's like whenever we've watched movies, women directors, it's like there is often a different quality to the way the women characters are presented in the movie. They have a lot oftentimes have more fullness to their character, and they're not used as a prop to somehow further a plot for the male character, or usually the or to be like the sex object.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the options. I think this was probably one of my favorite movies when I was a little kid, and I saw it so many times that like I almost feel like I never forgot any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw it when I was a teenager and I loved it still. And then I've seen it periodically through my life. It's kind of one of those movies that I watch when I just feel like I need some like nostalgic comfort. And so when I watched it this time, and actually I had just watched it like 3 months ago
Oh.
with Isaac because he had never seen it.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? That's like one of my favorite movies. I was like, if you want to know me when I was a little kid, like watch this movie.
Yeah.
And then of course he had his mouth hanging open because he was like, your mom let you watch this when you were a little kid.
This
I'm like,
is
yeah.
really nothing compared to the other movies that we watched. It's pretty tame. I mean, comparatively to some of them. But it seemed racy at the time, just because the whole Madonna was perceived as super racy, you know?
Well, it was like Madonna was like that Woody Nelson song but it was like, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be Madonna. That's kind of how I felt. Because
Yeah.
like every little girl and teenager wanted to be Madonna, at least for like 2 years.
Yes.
Until she cut her hair and married Sean Penn. And then it was like, I feel like that kind of changed the trajectory of like idol worship. That
Yeah.
look, because that look was not as accessible as the Desperately Seeking Susan Madonna look. That is very accessible because it's basically thrift store chic with an emphasis on the boudoir and crucifixes.
Yes, those were available. Yeah, and then I feel like I went back to her. I mean, so I was still a fan of her, but then I think it heightened again with the whole like truth or dare and all
Mm,
that stuff.
hmm
Then I was like, oh my God, yes, she's still amazing.
Yeah. I remember I watched the Truth or Dare documentary a lot.
I remember watching that with you for sure. And then
Yeah,
you
me too.
bought the book one time
Yeah.
at the mall, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're buying this. It was
Yeah.
so like risque. It had pictures of her in like underwear sitting on
Yeah.
someone's lap. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was really nothing that crazy, but it just seemed super, super off limits at the time. Like you were really breaking the rules by buying it.
Well, it's interesting because in the culture, Madonna has appealed to girls and women who maybe are a little more reserved and they have normal lives, but they can like escape into the fantasy. Like 80 in the 80s in particular, they can escape into the fantasy of being like Madonna. And you can have like a little piece of Madonna by dressing like her.
Hmm.
How this movie is because we have
Exactly.
we have Roberta who is completely she's 20, she's like mid 20s. She's married to a guy who's probably like 10 years older than her. He owns a hot tub store, like the hot tubs that you put in your houses too, not just like outdoor hot tubs. And he has a commercial on television. That's the level of success he's reached in their New Jersey town that they live in. And she's supposed to be happy. Like Roberta's supposed to be happy, but she isn't. And she finds herself like being lost in this saga of this interaction between these two people in personal ads. And like she gets to escape from her real life by indulging in the fantasy of Susan's life, even though she hasn't even seen Susan yet. So I just think that's funny that like this movie sort of like predicted the way that women wanted to be like Madonna.
Yeah, this perfectly embodies that. Roberta definitely wants that. Yeah, Roberta is played by Rosanna Arquette.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then her husband is named Gary Glass.
Gary,
I know you love the name Gary.
Gary. Sorry, Gary's.
And yeah, so she's just so bored with her life and she just follows these personal ads. And so Madonna's Susan, and then the guy that she is writing the ads back with is Jim.
Jim. Jim.
Hmm. And this was like before cell phones.
Yes.
So they travel a lot. She's kind
Mm.
of just like a grifter who roams around the country, getting into trouble and adventures. And he's in a band, so he travels a lot. So they just like use these ads as a way to reconnect with each other when they're back
Mhm.
in the same area.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, really, if you don't
Helps.
have a stable cell phone and you are a stable landline, you didn't have cell phones, what would you do?
And calls
Can't
were
hear.
really expensive back then.
Yeah, long distance, forget it.
Yeah. You have to
Yeah.
like do it at night and stuff.
Hmm. So it's funny. It's funny to think about. it makes it a good, plot point for the movie because it's more exciting and kind of a romantic way for her to follow what's going on with them. But
Mhm.
yeah, just funny to think about the times.
If you did it now, I guess it would be like you'd be like sort of stalkerish of people on Instagram, and then it would be really creepy and
Hmm.
not funny and cute.
Yeah. Yeah, so like the opening scene, just to
Mm.
kind of introduce us to Roberta
Mhm.
in her life, like what's going on. It opens in a salon in the 80s, which is
Mm.
just amazing.
Oh my
So
god.
many long red nails and feathered hair, and she's getting ready. And I think her birthday party is that night. So I think she's
Mhm.
getting ready for her party. And then her sister-in-law, who's like overly involved in her life and her husband's life, is played by Aunt Jackie, Marie
Yes.
Metcalf, who I love. I forgot she was in it. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. I love her so much.
Oh my God. Me too. And getting to see her with like big hair and makeup and everything on, because you don't usually see that. It was just so funny. I love her too. Roberta is looking at the newspaper, and then her sister in law is just standing over, kind of hovering, and they're talking. And she's like, what are you doing? I thought you were supposed to be looking at the classified. So I guess Roberta is supposed to be like looking for a job. And then her sister, Aunt Jackie, says, if you're looking for a job, don't take anything less than 50,000. Which I looked that up because I was like, in 1985, 50,000, that's a lot. So in today's money, it would be
Yeah.
$121,000. So I'm like, okay, obviously they have a lot of money, or like they're used to having money. She's only going to take a job that offers that much. So she must have some kind of education or something that she's just not using, and she's just being a housewife.
I got the feeling that she married an older guy. She married an older guy. He's providing her with security so she doesn't have to work. Roberta's very soft spoken and seems like somebody who probably wouldn't thrive in like the 80s career workforce. Like,
Right.
so I could see how it would be like, oh, well, I really like this guy. He's got his shit together and he can provide me with the life that everyone told me I'm supposed to want. I'll be living the dream. She's still not happy. And so I just assumed that she was like, probably went to him one night and was like, I think I'm going to get a job. I need something to do. My guess is he's probably not somebody that wants kids, and she doesn't seem like she wants kids either. So if you're a bored housewife and you don't want kids, you're probably going to go try to find a job to like, soothe your whatever boredom or, you're having. Also, Gary's an asshole. Okay, let's
Yeah.
just he's he's a total he's like there's not really anything about him that stands out as being like, oh yeah, I can see why she's with this guy. Like, or why she got sucked in or anything. He's just like this sort of he's beige. Everything about Gary is completely beige. He comes in and he comes into the kitchen or whatever, and he's talking to Roberta, and he says this story about how he's like, oh, I had to like, do all of the stuff at work, and it's so work's so hectic, and then I had this dinner, and and he's like going into this big long, and it's very clear that he's a liar and that he's having an affair.
Hmm.
And it's also clear and probably that he's having an affair with one of the girls in a bikini in his hot tub ad that he was playing at the party. Like,
I'm
so
sure.
so I'm like, okay, if you have anybody, just like a hot tip, if if you're talking to somebody and they start telling you a story with a lot of detail and they're saying it in a way that's like kind of nervous, like they're having like nervous fast talk that's not normal, they're lying.
Yeah.
So Gary's going to bed after the party. Roberta's sitting there in front of the cake, and she's like eating some of it. And then he's like, don't eat all the cake. And that just really pissed me off. And I'm like, don't fuck anybody who tells you not to eat cake. That's my motto in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Jesus. And I on one hand I was like, well, he could have just been saying that like, I want some, so don't eat it all.
That's not what he meant.
Okay, I wanted to ask you. I was like, maybe I'm just sensitive.
No. He's like, don't eat all that cake.
Okay, because you're gonna be a chubby bubby, and
Mm-hmm.
he only
And
wants
then
hot tub honeys. Hot tub honeys.
that's awesome. Yeah. So jumping ahead, so that just made me think I have to jump ahead for 1
Yeah,
second.
totally.
But then like flash forward, then they're reading her diary and they're going through one of the entries and she says, had the party, Gary came in while I was in the kitchen and I ate the rest of the cake. I was like, yes, good for you, Roberta.
Oh my God.
That was one of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what's going on with Roberta. Like, that's her life. So you can see why she's just so bored with it and she wants to follow Susan's life in the newspaper. And so the opening scene for Susan, which is just also like so memorable and wonderful. Madonna's like laying on the hotel floor, wearing that amazing jacket with the pyramid on the back and some lace outfit, and taking pictures of herself with a Polaroid. And there's just like food and booze all around on the floor. You can tell she's just been partying and having like a great time. And then room service comes and they bring her a newspaper and a bottle of tequila for like breakfast. So great. And then she looks in the paper and she finds the ad from Jim of like, hey, Desperately Seeking Susan. And so she's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go see him again. But while she's in the hotel room, then you see there's like a guy laying in the bed behind her. So it was who she had been with for a while, I guess. And when she leaves, she goes through his jacket and takes money out of his wallet.
Not all of it.
Yeah. Just some. And then she also takes a pair of earrings that were in there, like these really fancy giant gold dangly earrings. And then she leaves.
For inspiration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And she also gives the bellboy like a Polaroid of herself as his tip, like when he brings the breakfast. That was so great. But then so she's leaving the hotel. The guy's still passed out. And then when she's walking out in the hall, she spills her suitcase. And then this other guy walks past her going towards a room, and he's a very, shifty looking, and he
white hair
is very, lacking in pigment and
kind of like a rabbit.
Yeah, he's like a white rabbit, but like a shifty looking white rabbit. And he sees her, he like takes notice of her because of her jacket, which is like very unique and distinctive. And then she leaves. So he like remembers that. Then we find out that he's going to the hotel room where she had been because apparently the guy she'd been hooking up with was some kind of like mobster or something. And the earrings that she took were actually stolen from an exhibit and they were Nefertiti's earrings. So she doesn't realize that. So the guy's coming to look for the earrings. They're not there. So he murders the mobster and then he knows he needs to find Susan and he's following her based on that jacket. And then the hijinks ensue from there. And then that's how Roberta kind of like gets mixed up in all of it. Right? Because I was trying to think of like, how did all this actually happen? Yeah, like after the day after the party, when Roberta's like at the height of her boredom and depression, she's like, that's it. I'm going to go see Susan because she saw the latest ad too. And she's like, I'm going to go see her, see what's up and see like this romance in person. She follows Susan from there. And then she sees Susan go into like a thrift store because she sees these amazing boots. Susan sees these amazing boots. They're like crystal studs everywhere. And she just has to have them. And she trades her pyramid jacket for the boots.
Yeah.
Then Roberta,
The boots were $65 and I looked it up and it was $170.
Oh, okay.
Now, which is a lot of money for a vintage store.
Worth it though. But I guess she was being sensible because she had taken the money from that guy's wallet, but she didn't want to spend it. So she traded her jacket instead for the boots.
Yeah, so then that's how Roberta gets her hands on the jacket.
Hmm.
Unfortunately for Susan, Roberta also has the key to the locker that Susan had put her stuff in at the beginning. So Roberta gets knocked out by the white rabbit, and then she falls down a rabbit hole where when
Hmm.
she wakes up, she has no idea who she is.
Hmm.
And there's this absolutely beautiful human being sitting right by her.
Those eyes.
And that's why I always wanted to be Roberta and not Susan. When I was watching this movie, I had no interest in being Susan.
You're right, because Roberta had the way cuter boyfriend. Even though Susan was way cooler and had a better wardrobe.
So do you think, okay, I actually think Susan is a really rude person. And if you were to encounter her in real life, you would never want her to stay with you or anything. She gets basically every time she's around anyone, she just brings chaos and disaster into their lives. And she does not care that it happens. She has no, she has no, like, oh gosh, I didn't mean for your apartment to get trashed, or I just like she's presented as being like this cool, like hip woman, like she's like a feminist icon of the 80s kind of a in a way, which I understand, but this particular that's like Madonna, that's a whole other thing, but this particular character Susan, like if you just look at all of her behaviors, it's presented in such a way that you want to be her because Roberta wants to be her. But everybody's really identifying with Roberta. Or most people, I think, are probably really identifying with Roberta when they watch the movie. Just like the idea of, dreaming of like a life full of excitement and danger and a life where you're not so sensitive. Because, like, for people who are really sensitive, the appeal of someone like Susan is that they don't feel everybody else's emotions all the time. And so it just frees them up to do whatever the fuck they want. And that looks really appealing and exciting if you've spent your whole life trying to please everyone around you.
I think most people would identify more with Roberta and want to be Susan. I definitely would be more like Roberta, but wanting to be Susan.
What do you think about, like, when you're watching the movie, like, how do you feel about Susan in the moment?
Yeah, I feel like Susan is very just like selfish and taking what she needs from whoever she needs it from at the moment and then moving on to the next thing. And I mean, we literally see her doing that multiple times. But it's like she's just so, I guess, entertaining and she has something to offer that makes her lovable because they keep taking her back and wanting to be around her and just like inviting that chaos back into their life again. So
Mm-hmm.
just because she's so cool, I guess. So
Yeah.
really, I guess Susan is like Gary, the narcissist, only a way cooler version. She's like a cooler
Right.
version of Roberta's husband.
She's Susan is like if Gary was an artist.
Yeah, and we don't even really know like what does Susan do?
I think
I
she's
just
a grifter.
yeah, I just call her like a roaming grifter who dresses really well.
I had a question about whenever she's at the beginning, whenever she's in the hotel room with that guy and he's like passed out. I'm like, did they just party or did she like drug him?
No, they partied because she said that she
Okay.
had like been with this guy for a while. Like when she
Okay.
met up Jim, when she met with
Oh,
her like on
right.
and off again, and she was like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've been with this guy," and she
Okay.
tells Jim everything. So like he
Yeah.
knows that she's with other people, and he's probably with other people when he's on the road too, and they just have
Hmm.
like an understanding about that. I don't think she drugged him. I
Okay.
mean, I guess I wouldn't put it past her, but I think he was just passed out.
In this weird way, it's almost like she doesn't have a personality. I don't really know anything about her.
It's true. We don't really get to see much about her. It's all about the people around her, really.
Oh, how she's like a catalyst.
Yeah.
She inserts herself into a situation and she blows it up. And then she moves on to the next place. And then in this particular instance, she did everybody a favor because she has that creative fire energy that she brings into the environment, and people can, they're like, oh, I feel so alive and like charged around this woman, and
Yeah.
that's worth the potential of the next day waking up and realizing that all of your grandma's silverware is gone, you know?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And I know people kind of like that, and I
I
get
do
it.
too.
I'm
Yeah.
not, I just at the same time, it's like I would not want to be anything like Susan, and like her lifestyle did not appeal to me as a kid,
hmm
even though this was like my favorite movie. I was totally about Roberta's boyfriend.
Des, played by the beautiful Aidan Quinn.
Jesus.
Yeah. I'm sure he was like the first grown ass man that I was like, oh my God. As a 7-year-old, and I was like, that's a man. He's just so like gorgeous, but also like soft spoken,
Hmm.
but like a quiet masculinity where you know you can depend on him.
Hmm.
And he's artsy because he works in a cinema house,
Hmm.
like a little independent movie theater. And he wears suspenders. I mean, come on. He's
And
just so
as a
cute.
and as a cat, which he cuddles
Yeah.
with. There's like a scene of him
That's
cuddling with this cat. He doesn't have a shirt on, and I'm like, you know what, Susan, director, you are just pandering to all of the women in the audience right now, and I love it.
it's
Thank-
true. That's another sign of a female director right there.
like, you know how many tits we've put up with looking at? You can at least have a shirtless man hanging out with a cat who's purring.
Exactly. That's worth like 1,000 hits equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so his phone number. So Dez's phone number was in the jacket pocket because Jim had given it to Susan. He's like, I'm worried about you
Hmm.
because of this mob guy. And if anything happens, call Des. He'll help you. So that's why when Roberta wakes up from her and with amnesia, he was already there because Jim had called him and told him to go
Yeah,
check on
Jim
her.
Jim told Des like, "Hey, my girl's coming in. Go check on her."
He thinks that she's Susan. So
Hmm.
she thinks that she's Susan too once she hears the story.
Hmm.
And then she stays with Des at his apartment until she can figure out what's going on. And she's trying to find clues to like, who am I? And then
Hmm.
she finds a postcard from the Magic Club, which is
Yeah.
where Susan had gone because her friend works there.
Hmm.
And that's like such a great visual memory too of like going into this old club where they're doing a magic show and it looks like it's like stuck in the 60s. All of
Yeah.
the patrons there look like they're dressed from the 60s still, and it's just like going back in time when you walk through that door. And there's like the cigarette girl walking around with a tray of cigarettes like from the 40s. It's
Hmm.
just so great.
Definitely where I would hang
Oh
out
yeah.
if I lived in the area.
Yes. And the costumes, it's so good. So yeah, she goes there to try to figure out like who am I? What am I doing? How did I know this place? But she doesn't really get any clues, but she ends up getting a job there
Hmm.
and taking over for Susan's friend who had been fired because she wouldn't sleep with the boss there. Yeah,
Which is just like par for the course
exactly.
because it was then.
Totally. You know what's ironic about that is like Rosanna Arquette was one of the people who wouldn't sleep with Harvey
Yeah.
Weinstein and then ended up being like blackballed.
Yep.
It's kind of like predicting the future. The Magic Club, she's there, blah blah blah. Somehow I like so many different things have to fall into place for
Hmm.
for these things to happen. And like even going back in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute, now how did he find her there? So then
Yeah.
somehow the guy that was after Susan traces Roberta to the Magic Club
Yeah,
where
because
she's
he's just
working.
following Roberta because he's
Hmm
following the jacket.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, just speaking of the jacket, I realize that I have a favorite quote, but then
Hmm.
also a lot of times I have a quote that sums up the 80s
Yeah.
for me. So I'm going to introduce a new segment called Sums Up the 80s.
Awesome.
And it's when Gary sees Roberta's new pyramid jacket. And Roberta tells him, "Oh, I went to this, thrift store, I got a jacket. It used to belong to Jimi Hendrix." And then Gary says, "You bought a used jacket? What? Are we poor?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "Sums up the 80s." You know what I mean?
Yes. Gary.
The White Rabbit. Every time this guy with white hair shows up,
Yeah.
something happens to Roberta that either sends her into spirals her on a completely different trajectory. And so the first time it happens, she gets amnesia. And then
Yeah.
the second time it happens, she comes out of amnesia,
Hmm.
which is like, there's just such a big Alice in Wonderland theme.
Yeah.
Roberta goes on an adventure and she gains a lot of power and
Hmm.
she discovers herself for who she really is, aside from a man, even though like she ends up with Des. But Des, this whole time, because Roberta doesn't know who she is, Des just assumes that she's Susan. And so Des treats her like you would treat a good friend's girlfriend. Okay, so whenever Roberta disappears, um, because she has amnesia, Leslie, Gary's sister, Leslie just lives to like completely torment her brother all the time because I think Leslie thinks that her brother is a dick.
Yes.
And I think it's in this moment when she's talking to him when I realize like, oh, Leslie wasn't hanging around Roberta because she's a nosy asshole. She was hanging around Roberta because she thinks her husband's an asshole and she wants to
Hmm.
kind of like protect Roberta. There's a quality like there's actually more of a she wishes Roberta was her sister instead of Gary being her brother. And so I was like, okay, that's cool too, because she's not like, because when you first meet Leslie, I was like, is she going to be one of those like nosy nag in-laws that's just like, always on her brother's side, even, and like is totally, that type in a
Yeah.
movie. But she's completely the opposite. And in fact, she says, she, whenever Gary's like, I don't know where my wife went, Leslie's like, well, do you know how to get her off? Because if you don't know how to get her off, which you probably don't, that's probably why she left you.
I love that conversation.
It's 1985. This is amazing.
It is. She's like, well, was she sexually satisfied? And then she asks him about orgasms. She's like, you do know what it is, don't you, Gary? Yeah, she knows that her brother is just like a terrible husband, probably terrible in bed,
She knows
and just a
he's
bad person.
cheating.
Yeah, and she says, oh, she knows that she said like, oh, I know all about you, and she probably knows all about you running around with Debbie, whatever. And he's like, we're not running around, we're having a perfectly respectable affair.
Yeah, I'm having an affair, so now I'm fancy. It's like, no, you're just kind of an asshole.
Exactly. Yeah, and then later when Susan finds Gary because of like a phone number that she left at the thrift store or whatever. They end up hooking up, and she's like, I need to find Roberta because she's got all my shit. And he needs to find her because it's his wife. And so I don't think he actually really cares about finding her. He just technically should find her since it's his
Yeah,
wife. He's just like doing it because it's like, well, people will ask questions if I don't look for her. So I better seem concerned.
I also thought there was an element of, how dare she leave me? I thought I had the upper hand in this relationship. If I
Yeah.
didn't think I had the upper hand in the relationship, I never would have married her in the first place. Like,
Hmm.
that's Gary to me, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And then so Susan like ends up back at their house because she's working with them to find her. And she goes through all of Roberta's stuff. She just immediately goes through the bedside table where you'd find like any juicy stuff.
Yeah.
And she finds all these books, like basically self-help books about like, does your marriage suck? Do you never have orgasms and everything? And Gary's like, what? He's like, he doesn't even think that Roberta would be interested in sex. Because later Roberta gets picked up for being, yeah, a sex
Oh,
worker. And then he's like,
oh.
I don't believe that. She doesn't even like sex.
Mhm.
It's like, first of all, that's not how it works. And second of all, you obviously are not having sex with your wife and you are not keeping her sexually satisfied at all. And you don't even think that that's important to her. And you're just off having affairs with other people instead.
Yeah.
Ugh, Gary.
Gary he's beige. Like,
Totally
that's
beige.
one of the problems. So, like, you know how you can have somebody, okay, so we've kind of established that Gary and Susan are both incredibly narcissistic people. But you can see Susan seems fun to hang out with. Gary, her shenanigans might be worth it under some circumstances.
Yeah.
Gary, on the other hand, is boring, really boring. Like, there's nothing really about him that stands out in any way except that he's self-absorbed. And to me, like, that kind of sums up what the impression I was getting in the 80s of what men were supposed to be like.
Yeah. It's like just be sure that you provide her with like a nice house that she can stay in while you're out doing whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And then you've done your part.
Yes.
Like you don't have to come home to that house as long as you've provided it for her.
Yes.
And anything that you do beyond that, you're just like excused from because of the pressures that you're under to provide
Mm.
that house for her.
She made me do it. If she didn't want this house in the suburbs and the pool in the backyard, if she didn't want that, then I wouldn't be under so much stress. And then I wouldn't need to sleep with my secretary. Who's
The
20, even though I'm 50.
80s.
The 80s.
Like every decade,
Yeah.
really.
But I mean, I think it's getting better. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true when there's like more financial equality between partners.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems like at the very least, women are cheating more and catching up with men. So
Cheating more.
yeah, they're cheating more. So what I get, and I'm not saying like, oh, good, women are cheating more. But what I
Yeah.
mean, what I mean, is like, finally equality.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but what I mean is that it seems like that is in line with women being more career oriented in their, even though they're married. So it leads me to think that having a career is really what would make you more likely to have an affair.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. Go
that
ahead.
might just be easy access because you're encountering people in a world that's probably different and not going to cross circles with your home life. You
Yeah.
know, them being so with Leslie and Gary sneaking around in Roberta's stuff, comes my favorite quote from Leslie. You might know.
Oh.
So
Hmm.
my favorite quote, so they find her diary and Leslie says, "Diary, that little sneak. What did she say about me?"
Yeah. It's so funny. Would you do that? Would you read someone's diary if it was
If
out?
they were missing,
Okay.
yeah, but not otherwise.
Hmm.
Because you know what happens when you snoop? If you find something, you can't say anything or you reveal that you snooped. So really you're just fucking your own head
Hmm.
over. Or you look like the asshole if you find anything and you confront somebody about it. And I've actually had two different boyfriends read, because I've always been an avid journaler, and I
Hmm.
had two different boyfriends read my journals over period of time. So,
How'd you find out?
because they confronted me about something I wrote.
Oh my God.
And I was like, this is why you shouldn't snoop, dude. Like,
Yeah. Insane.
yeah. So when they were reading
Yeah.
her diary, I was just like, nope. But,
They
or,
had an
I mean,
excuse.
I was like, they have an excuse. Like, I would read a diary. Cause, like, what if she had met some guy and
Sure.
started having an affair? And then she was like, we're going to go away for the weekend. And when I come back, I'm going to tell Gary it's over.
Mhm.
And then you're like, okay, well, where is she? Why didn't she come back? Is this guy creepy? Like, you
Exactly.
know,
It's like a Dateline episode.
yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought the reading, that's like to me, the only excuse to read somebody's diary is if they have disappeared or have been murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, just don't do it.
Exactly. That leads to, there are just like so many scenes where I was like, yes, I was getting like fulfilled from each
Yes.
scene that I saw. And like when Madonna was laying on the bed reading her diary with like Chips Ahoy, Oreos, cheese puffs. Everywhere she went, there was like cheese puffs, which I loved. And she's wearing like a wife beater, which I don't think we're supposed to call them that anymore. A men's white undershirt, boxers, and like lace, a lace garter somehow. Uh, and it just looked so amazing. And she was just like laying on the bed on her belly in this amazing outfit, reading a diary, eating junk food in a pink 80s bedroom. And I was just
Yes.
like, this is fulfilling me in so many ways right now. I just loved it. And then my husband had actually definitely seen this movie and he was like, oh my God, this is the scene where like I became a man. He like definitely remembered her laying on the bed in a certain way with those boxers and the lace garters. And I was like, yeah, I get this. And then when she like goes to the place the ad in the newspaper and she like goes out on the street, she's wearing that same outfit and she just throws on one of Gary's like dress shirts over it and walks downtown wearing
Yeah.
that. That is like such an iconic scene. I was just like, she's amazing. That was like groundbreaking. Who would wear that but
Yeah.
her? And then she walks past those three triplet guys that
Yeah.
like check her out, and they were like the most 80s cheeseball looking. Oh God, that scene.
I know.
That's just so good. But she was like taking control of the situation. So even though she looked like a party girl, like all sexy, she was like handling things. And she
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, I'm here and I'm going to take care of this.
Yeah.
She figured out the way to find Roberta
Yes.
and got stuff done.
Yeah. None of the
Mm-hmm.
guys in this movie get anything done.
No, they don't.
They just like flounder around
Uh-huh.
and like worry about what the women think about them,
That's a nice change.
which is usually the opposite. I mean, this movie actually feels like almost more, it still feels more modern now than a lot of movies that have been made in like the past 10 years or something to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's two women who consistently assert themselves. Actually, well, Leslie does too. So three women who consistently assert themselves in situations and the men who love them. Like, what?
All the guys are pretty cool and supportive except for Gary, the
And
actual
Gary, like,
husband.
by the end of the movie, you realize that Gary is just an idiot and that he's
Uh-huh.
like, it's almost like it's not that he's a jerk, it's that he's just kind of stupid. And he just like was like, oh, hey, overculture. What are you telling me to be like? Oh, is this the kind of man I'm supposed to be? Well, then I guess that's the kind of man I am. I'm doing a good job. Like Gary thinks he's doing a great job
Mm-hmm.
because his culture has told him as a man, you're doing a great job, dude. You got a wife who's hot. She's 10 years younger. You got a career. You got a commercial on TV and you got babes in bikinis. And by the end of the movie, he has been humbled, I would hope.
I think so. I think so. And he just expects Roberta to come home with him, and she doesn't. And that's like a wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
and she says, "Look at me, Gary." And then does, and he says something like dismissive, and she's like, "No, look at me." It's like, you never see me. Now you're really seeing me for the first time, and it's too late, and now I'm leaving you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to sleep with Des instead. So
I
sorry. Bye.
I would not be sorry.
Yeah, it's so good. And so like Susan comes up with a way to finally like get in touch with Roberta. They all meet up at the Magic Club. Like that's where everything culminates, back at the Amazing Magic Club. And they're able to capture the White Rabbit guy when he's trying to get the earring. They capture him, and they finally meet each other. That's the first time
Mm-hmm.
Susan and Roberta meet, right? Is when
Yeah.
Roberta is rescuing Susan from the rabbit guy, and she
Yeah.
bashes him over the head with like a bottle of scotch. And then they're like, "Hey, I'm Susan. Hey, I'm Roberta." And it's beautiful. And then at the end, we see that they both get awarded by the city for like helping capture him, and they're holding hands and like cheering together. And it's just like a beautiful friendship, girl power moment.
Yeah. It's sweet.
Yes, it's
And
sweet.
it's like women being together, supporting each other. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Leslie supports and defends Roberta to her
Yeah.
brother, and Roberta and Susan team up, and Susan wasn't like, what did she didn't get all weird and soap opera with Roberta. And I will say though, I feel like Gary really has daddy issues.
What do you mean?
Well, like he wants to keep his wife like subservient and a
Mm-hmm.
child. So I feel like he has daddy issues. Like he needs to be a daddy,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't know how to interact with a woman who isn't viewed as subservient to him somehow,
Yeah.
except for his sister.
And I just like this movie was positive overall. It was like
Hmm.
Madonna was very cool, very sexual, but empowered in her sexuality.
Hmm.
She was never like ogled or taken advantage of or like
Object.
fondled. You know
She
what I
was.
mean?
She wasn't objectified either.
Yeah. She just like owned it. And people admired and respected it. It was like, yeah, look
Hmm.
at her. But they weren't, yeah, objectifying her, like you said. They were just appreciating what they saw
Hmm.
and her power. She just has like, yeah, a really unique way of being able to do that. So I think it was actually like a positive message for a 7-year-old girl.
Yeah, I really feel like Madonna in the 80s had a huge influence on me because I admired her sexuality. And that was a very specific thing. This woman is showing herself as a powerful individual who has her own sexual agency, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a man is afforded the luxury of doing in our society, but women were really not allowed that in the early 80s. And people would talk about Madonna like she was a real threat.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a threat. She was a threat to the patriarchy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
keeping women ashamed of enjoying the pleasures of their own fucking body. Here's the pleasure I take in my own self and in my ability to move in the world and express my physicality any way I want. That's really threatening. And it's threatening to a lot of women as well who can't
Yes.
who can't express that for whatever reason, who can't or don't want to. And they see that and then it's like, "Oh, well now what? Now I'm supposed to act like this?" Oh, is this what men want now? Because I spent my whole goddamn life growing up thinking, because y'all told me that men want this like docile housewife. But now you're
Men
telling
want
me
Robertas.
they want Roberta's, but now you're telling me that they want the Susans.
But they want Susan's without the attitude. They want the like sexuality of Susan with the um temperament of a Roberta.
So me?
A Roberta in the street and a Susan in the bedroom.
Yeah, that's how I am.
They want a Holly.
I'm gonna cut that out.
Yeah. I just remember Madonna being like so vilified and like
Mm-hmm.
controversial. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
then looking back at it, it's like, wow, why? You know, it's so tame, even like comparatively by today's standards, but she
I
was very
know.
groundbreaking. And she really wasn't even doing anything that controversial or outlandish, but it was just controversial at the time.
Well, also it was explicit because there's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of women who have flaunted their bodies in public through history, and they've been highly praised.
Mm-hmm.
But the way in which they were flaunting their bodies was really, there was a submissiveness to it and this coquettishness of, oh, you need to get all that lipstick on your collar.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that kind of thing. And it's like the seven, have you ever seen that movie, The 7-Year Itch?
Mm-hmm.
It's like she's constantly bending over. She moves in a way that's showing off her sexuality and her
Mm-hmm.
body, but it's not what she owns. It's how her power comes from being the object.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't come from being the agent. And Madonna comes from being the agent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that's threat. It's not the sex. It's that she was saying, I'm taking my pleasure and I'm getting pleasure. These are my choices. And it was like this very, she was very assertive. And that was the part that's a threat. It's hard to put my finger on the power that that Madonna's able to channel through
Mm-hmm.
when she expresses herself. And
Another Madonna song.
yeah. And I mean, we could talk all day about like the appropriation, all of the critiques that have been put on her, which I totally get where people are coming from. But as a person who was heavily influenced by Madonna as a child in the 80s, there was something that was completely different about her that women had never been given the opportunity to identify with before, of being someone who is sexually empowered and has agency over their body. I mean, she garnered pearl clutching from people who didn't have pearls. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like this whole thing of like, this woman must be stopped. You know, she's like corrupting
Mm-hmm.
the girls. She did corrupt. She did corrupt the girls. Thank goddess. Speaking of patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
um, so Roberta has this like in the when the white rabbit guy kind of like really catches up with her after her magic act, the first time. So Roberta's got these two doves in a cage,
Yeah.
and then um she's like running from the guy, the mob guy, and she goes into a factory, and there's this creepy guy
Oh my
in the
God.
factory.
The
So it's
security
like,
guard.
the security guard's like, ooh, here's this his hot babe that came in just like a cupcake. It's really my
Mm-hmm.
night, you know? And he's got like girlies all over
Oh
the
yeah.
walls and stuff. But you notice like how that how that scene was shot, you know those are nudie pictures, but you don't really see them.
Mm-hmm.
So even there was an opportunity to like objectify women, but instead it was used as a prop to show that this guy was probably like a sexual creep.
Yeah. It's not like Spicoli's room where you see every spread eagle person, every spread eagle woman in her
Right.
dress. Yeah. Yeah, you definitely just see the creep vibes from this guy, and she's alone and coming to him for help in the middle of the night, and you're just like, ooh.
Yeah. So then she runs out and she runs into some cops who don't ask her any questions. They're immediately like, "Oh, hey, you're a hooker. You're
Mm-hmm.
wearing because she's still got her outfit on from her magician assistant outfit, and she really does look like a cupcake. Like she's got a lot of
Mm-hmm.
on and stuff. It's a pretty great outfit.
It was.
And so I was like, so they arrest her for being, as they would say, a prostitute, a sex
Mm-hmm.
worker, and I'm like, this happened. This, like, I don't know about now, but I remember in the 90s reading about women getting stopped by cops in cities who had, like, a short skirt on. And they would be like, you're coming with us.
What?
Yeah, this is like a thing that would happen in
Oh my God.
cities. Obviously, probably more with Black women, but
Mm-hmm.
um, like everything else. But
Oh
you
my
know,
God.
yeah, I mean, I remember that because it was like, I remember this one, I read this article and this woman in New York City had been arrested for being a sex worker because she was standing outside of a bar. And I think like the bar might have got raided or something. I'm not really sure, but something was going on that cops were there. She was standing outside and she got arrested for being a sex worker. And then when they looked in her purse and saw she had a condom, that was the evidence they used.
You're kidding. Oh
Yeah.
my
I
God.
mean, obviously the charges were dropped and stuff because it's
Okay.
like she's like a college student or whatever, but
Uh-huh.
like not that that precludes you from being a sex
Oh
worker, but
yeah.
I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying like it was absurd, but like that was the level of like sexism that was still happening, in the
Mm-hmm.
90s. And granted, I have no statistics on how common that was or anything. It was just a story I read, but it stuck out with me and I remembered it when I was watching this movie because I got really mad at the cops because I'm like, here's clearly a woman in danger. So, like, every man that she's encountered has been a threat to her. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
don't go out alone, ladies, because this is what happens. You're just like endlessly, mercilessly persecuted by creepy guys, even the cops.
Yeah, she was laying on the ground like helpless because he had just attacked her and ran
Yeah.
off. And they pick her up from the ground and then arrest her.
Yeah. Instead of going after the guy who assaulted her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which to me, like, I feel like that was a deliberate, choice on the part of the filmmakers to
Mm-hmm.
show that this kind of thing really happens, that cops in the city go around and they assume that if you're a woman who isn't dressed the way they think a good girl's dressed,
And you're
then
out
that
late
means,
at night.
yeah, you're a lady of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you said?
Oh, I said, and you're out late at night.
Oh,
But you're also a lady of the night. And you have doves. So I love the part when she gets into the cop car. Then there's another woman in the back of the car who presumably had been picked up for sex work as well. And she was like, looked at her and she's like, how do you use the doves? As if she used them in part of her sex work. It was so funny. Yeah.
oh, and then whenever Leslie and Gary find out that Roberta was arrested for being a sex worker,
Uh-huh.
um, Leslie, just to torment her brother, is like, I've heard 4 out of 5 prostitutes are lesbians,
I
Gary.
know.
She takes every opportunity to emasculate Gary.
Yep.
And it makes Gary tolerable.
Yeah, Leslie is the best. Then I think she said she watched like an expose or something about how a lot of housewives are like sex workers during the day.
Yeah.
Like they go downtown and shop and then they just do a little sex work and then come home and make dinner.
Every husband's nightmare.
I don't know. There are just like so many great scenes. I love all of the like their house, Gary and Roberta's house is like 80s modern porn right now. It's
Oh,
so
totally.
great. Gary and Leslie are at the police station going to find out about Roberta. Madonna takes like a small TV from inside their house and brings it out by the pool and sets up like her own living room by the pool. And she has like bottles of champagne and cookies and cheese puffs and just everything. She's just like luxuriating in the backyard. It's kind of like how you said she doesn't care that she's causing like so many problems and just creating a mess, but she's just like living her best life all the time. It just looks so great. I mean, as a child watching that, it's like, yeah, who wouldn't want to be watching TV while you're in the pool eating junk food? Yeah, so but then Gary's high when Roberta calls him from jail. Because she calls for help. And he's like so high, he doesn't even know what's going on, or he thinks it's a joke or something, right? He doesn't come get her.
They got her the next morning, didn't they?
No, Des came and got her from jail because Gary was like all high and not responding properly. So then she called Des. Yeah. And he rescued her.
No, Madonna answered.
Okay, and she didn't.
Yeah, Susan answered, and then she was like, "Oh shit."
Oh, that's right. She's like, "Why is there a woman answering my phone?
Why is a woman answering?"
Yeah. So then she calls Des, and then she tells Des like, "Hey," because when she loses her amnesia after falling that other time, then she tells him like, "I'm actually a housewife," and he's like, "Oh," and he doesn't believe her.
Yeah.
So she tries to tell him the truth.
Well, because he's heard all of these stories about Susan. Yeah. And so he does not trust Roberta as Susan. So, and like they kissed that one time and then he was like, "Oh shit." Like, nope.
But then that night they do sleep together.
Yes.
Because he's just like, can't resist her anymore. Yeah. He's going to tell Jim and be like, "I'm sorry, Jim, but I'm in love with Susan." It's really not Susan.
Which is so funny when him and Jim realize that their Susans aren't the same people. It's like such a relief.
It's just so cute. I just loved it.
Cute.
I will definitely keep watching it through the years.
Yeah, it's great.
I don't know. Anything else?
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else about this movie. I mean, it's nice to end. It's nice to end season 1 with Desperately Seeking Susan, because I feel like it's a movie we both totally loved and adored as children, and like to have it still be great and feel modern in a lot of ways is like really refreshing.
Yeah, it's a great feeling.
Well, everyone, we have come to the end of season 1 of Cover Your Eyes, and we will be back in 3 weeks with more exciting movies, more horror, more drama, and more laughter.
So in this movie, Roberta is bored with her own life, and she becomes obsessed with Susan's life and basically wants to become Susan and live the exciting life that she has. So have you ever had an experience like that where you just meet someone or see someone that looks super exciting to you and your life seems really boring by comparison, and you want to kind of like meet them, live vicariously through them, become them? Any situation like that? If you have, we'd love to hear about it. Email us at coveryoureyespodcast@gmail.com, or you can message us on Instagram or Twitter. Also, if you have ideas for other movies we should cover in the future, we'd love to hear those too.
Thank you for listening to Cover Your Eyes Podcast. If you like our show, please feel free to count the ways. Find us on patreon.com/coveryoureyespodcast.
You can also visit our store on Redbubble at Cover Your Eyes Podcast.
And don't forget, we love it when you subscribe, rate, and review.
Are we going to say see you next Tuesday still?
Okay, we could say Bye, y'all. See you next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay.
I give it 100%.
I give it 95% just for Aiden Quinn.